Hello, welcome to this episode. So, in today's episode, I just want to give you what we are going to cover. We are going to look at the user and shop management. We are going to look at a bit of relationships, understanding like one-to-many relationship, like a relationship between a user and a shop. We are going to go ahead and define the models for the user and also the models for the shop. And we'll also go ahead and define different routes. We'll have for instance, the user route, which is going to have a couple of routes. So far, we have three routes here, and we have also a couple of controllers that we created. And the most important one is the create user controller, which is having a couple of things that we also covered, more especially these checks to check and how we handle the error handling, and also going to look at advanced technique like hashing the passwords and also giving default values and also modifying the return to secure the data that is returned back to the client. As you can see here, we securely remove the passwords. So yeah, this is what you're going to cover in this episode. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome to the study episode. In our previous episode, um, we looked at versioning. So we used MVC pattern. We used versioning plus routing. So we gave our app a better routing, and we added versioning, and we used the MVC, and we created this application, which was really, really nice. And I hope you enjoyed it. So in today's episode, we are going to start on the actual API that make our inventory application. Okay. So if you go back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to leave the link, someone requested that I give the access to the PowerPoint. I'm just going to leave the link to this PowerPoint in the documentation, and I saw maybe I will also leave the link in the description to get the PowerPoint direct. But let's just continue with our PowerPoint, which has actually all the models we're going to be looking at. So in today's, we are going to be covering the user model and the shop model, and it will help us to manage the users and also to manage the shop. Okay. So I chose those two ones because at the beginning of the application, they are the most essential ones. So by the time a user wants to log in into the system, means that the user must be already existing in a list of users on our application. That means the user is the first model to be created, because everything is going to be, most of the things are going to be based on the user or the shop. So we need to have the user and the shop created at first, because when the admin creates admin logs in, after the admin logging in, then the shop attendant, the admin can create the shop and then assign some attendants or create some attendants to be assigned to that shop. So we need those two models to start with. So down here you have the user and the shop management as our first models. So there are two things you need to identify and be crucial about when you're just going to create a model. Okay. The first thing, you need to be knowing the shape. Okay. The shape, and that means like the shape are the fields. Like what fields do make up this model? Okay. Like which fields do I need to look out? You need to know the shape or the structure of the model. And normally these ones, you can always get them, like you can be guided from a form. Okay. Normally when you just get confused and you don't know the fields to put in this, you ask or you just Google on getting a user form. So for instance, you could just like say, I want to go ahead, and then you Google like a user form. Okay. So you Google like a user form, go to images, and then like you will just select the user form. Always, they are always the same. name, user ID, blah blah, something like that. Okay, so you can just say go course, just like get a user form, and you can also just put also design, just so as to get like the nice forms here. Okay, so you can just look at like at the form like this one. Okay, if you just like click on this, we're not going to use of course this one, but I just like want to give you just like so that you can just always get a very easy to know the fields and from the form. For instance, you can say there is a name, email, country, phone, password, and so on and so forth. So normally when a user is going to create an account, at least you're just going to get like some details from this person. So that's why I'm saying that you can get always the fields all guided by a form. So if you're just confused on which fields to use, you can just also look in the form. And then another thing to look out in a model when you're going to create a model are relationships. Okay, and how do you know a relationship? For instance, let's say you are going to create maybe a shop, and a shop must have like maybe an admin, or a shop must have attendants, and so on and so forth. So normally whenever you see a drop down, select things in a form. Also be taking care of that there might be a relationship, not always, but sometimes. So here, if you look in drop downs or selections in forms, so this is not a must, or it is not something like you have to rely on so heavily. But most of the times when you see something like drop down, just be aware that it can't just be a relationship. For instance, let's say you are creating a student and they ask you which class, and it is a selection or it's a drop down asking you which class is this student, meaning there is a class somewhere, and then there is this student, and there must be a relationship between a student and a class. Okay, for instance, if you are creating as we said a shop, and they ask you to choose the admin or the admin by default, so you will see that at least we will have that kind of control, or you can just like use that to define if there is a relationship. So basically, we have to talk about the user and the shop, how they are related to each other. So if you just move down here, there are so many relationships as we are going to be going through them, but the most common one actually is a one-to-many and a one-to-one. A one-to-many is so much common, and a one-to-one is also common, and then there is a many-to-many, and we're going to be covering them we'll be covering them slowly as we move on, because relationships tend to be actually complicated, more especially for beginners. When you are starting, you actually don't understand what relationships are all about. But relationships are just like how are the two things related to each other. Okay, the way you just say like you have a family, and the family has maybe members, and then like you say what's the relationship between a family and members, and you say a family must have some members. So it's just like a sort of like, as you can hear, it is a relationship. And here the relationship we have, and this comes with experience, you don't have, by the way, at the beginning to beat your head to understand so much the relationships. As time goes on, from my experience on the students I've taught, as time goes on, you start actually identifying the pattern and also understanding, oh, okay, uh, they are doing this, okay, so this is the relationship, is just like this. So, and the good thing is that in this building of this API, we have tons of relationships that we are going to meet on the way. So you are going to understand how this actually works. But basically, there is the common one, as I've said, is a one-to-many relationship. And a one-to-many relationship is when one item has many things, as you can just see. For instance, a user can be an admin of multiple shops. Okay, so we have now one user can have many shops. That is a one to many. A single user or one user can have multiple shops. He can own multiple shops. So that is a relationship. Okay. That means each shop each shop at least must have an admin, okay? Because they belong. So shops belong to a certain admin, okay? They belong to a certain admin, and that means there is no shop that is going to exist without an admin. So this means that a single user, when assigned the role of an admin, has ability to manage more than one shop. So this relationship is represented by the admin field in the shop model. Each shop has an admin ID, which is a foreign key linking to a specific user, the admin. We're just going to get to the user model in the user model just in a bit. Don't get scared. But on the other hand, we have also user as an attendant. Remember, we have a user as admin. Like a user has a role of an admin and also has a role of an attendant. So we'll make it that by default, when you create a user, of course, will be an attendant, and because you cannot have so many admins, but of course you can have maybe at least we'll just make it that a shop must belong to a single admin. So users an attendant. A user can also be an attendant in a shop, and attendants work in shops created by the admin. So we're also going to have the attendance field or the attendance IDs in the shop model. As I've said, right now at this point, if you find relationship right now, like not understanding it very well, as we move on, you will actually get to know it. Okay, you don't have to beat your head. As I explain more or doing more examples, you will be understanding. So let's look at the user model. So the user model will have, for instance, an ID. So for every model you create, it must have an ID. That is a must. It must have an ID and it is used as a unique identifier. So we always use IDs as a unique identifier. At least it is the only one thing that in a model that has to be unique by default. Okay, so we're just going to correct other things as email, username, password, first name, last name, phone number, date of birth, gender, image, role, and so many others. And now look at particularly this one, the shops. Because we said that an admin can have multiple shops, that's why we put this a relationships managed by the user or the admin. So the admin can have uh, an admin can have multiple shops. That's why we are adding this field of shops, and they are related to this model shop. We are going to look at it in a second. And here on the role, you can see we have something called enum. So enum is when you have to define the types for a particular field. You can see as we have been putting string, datetime, gender, string, datetime, and others, integers, and so on and so forth. But when we want to define our own values to be entered on a specific field in a model, then we define them in an enum. So an enum is just the way you see a drop-down selection. So you can define fields or the values that can be entered within this enum. And then we just go ahead and use this enum in the shop, in the model just like this. So it is just used the way we use other types, just like this. Okay, and then moving down to the shop model, the shop you can see it has an ID, it has a name, location, created at admin ID. So as we said, there is no any shop that can be created without the admin. That's why we have this relationship. And this is how we write the one-to-many relationship. in the shop, you have to put that there is an admin ID, meaning that by the time you create a shop, you must pass in the admin ID. And then this admin, of course, is of type user, is just like a one user from the so many users we have in the shop. Now that we have this, as we're just going to be moving on, I will be giving more explanations. You don't have to actually to beat your head. So moving on, let's just go ahead and uh, put these models into Prisma. That is our first step to add this inside here. And I'm just going to go to the notepad here where I wrote them. I'm just going to transfer them to um, I'll just transfer them to, so I'll just go here and copy Control C, and I will just go and paste them here. Okay. So make sure that the IDs, the first thing is the IDs has to be of this type. So I'm just going to copy this and let me just take it to the shop here. Just like so. And then this admin ID, why they are underlining it, it must be of type object ID. As you can see here, they're saying warning admin in the model shop field, shop.admin ID. User must have the same native type of MongoDB. To join those collections correctly, consider either removing user.id native type attribute or adding a db.object.id on the admin ID. So this, what they're trying to mean is they want to know if you said that here in the relationship that this admin is of type user, and this admin ID references to the ID in the user. But then when you go to the user, you will see that this ID is of type object ID. So they want to make sure that the type of this, it is correlating very well with in here. So the only thing to do is to add db dot object ID. As simple as that. It's the only thing you just need to do, and to be matching with this one. I'm just going to go ahead and remove these comments. I'm not sure if we need to leave them just to make sure everything is clean. I was putting them just for you. So let me just go and remove all these. Sorry. I will just remove like this: first name, last name, phone number, date of birth. I just need to remove all these just to have. Okay, so you can see here on the role, by default, we are giving it an attendant. So when you register a user and don't specify any role, they will give them a role of an attendant. And okay, just like this. Okay, so we have the user, now the shop. Now we can just like put this. You don't need to put this. This one is going to be attendants, attendant IDs. Here we just need attendant IDs, and they will be string, and then they will be at db.object ID. As simple as that. Just remove this one. We don't need this. Okay, so what this means is that in the shop, the one thing before you create the shop, you must have an admin. Okay, and then as you create this here, okay, attendants.ids, this one means that a shop can have a list of attendants IDs. So as you are selecting, or will have like a mad select, So here, whenever you have something like this, means you're going to have a mad select. Okay. Okay. So nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and now push this. Okay, and one thing also to know is this password is actually a hashed a hashed password. This one is a hashed password, and we're going to look at how we're going to use bcrypt to hash it. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead. The first thing is to run npx prisma db push. Okay, just like this. This will push all our models into, and you can see it went ahead and created these ones, and then it also generated the Prisma client. Now that we can run npm run dev. Okay, so the first thing is we are going to start with a user. Okay, so where do we start from? So the starting point always is just going to be you going to the routes. Okay, so you can just first go, for instance, to the controller here, and you write users.ts. So this is where we're going to put all the functions for creating a new user. Okay, so you can just start by saying we just want to create a user. Okay, and create a user, you have the same sort of a function from here, just like this. I will just go to the users and just paste this. This one is going to be create user. Okay, it will also take in the request and the response. Now we're just going to look at what we are supposed to actually abstract from the body. Okay, so uh, create user, and I'm just going to remove all these. Okay, I'm just going to remove all these just like this. Sorry, just remove this. Okay, so the first thing is to make sure that we just import this request from Express, and then response also from Express. So basically we have a function create user, which takes in a request and also a response. Now, for the request, always it is coming from the form. Okay. So whenever you see a request, this is where our data dwells, and that's why we just putting this in the form. So depending on the sign up form, okay, depending on the sign up form, or you have to create your sign up form to match all these details. So we must get the email, the username. I'm just going to select them using Alt. I can click one, double click one and press Alt, and then double click on others, password, first name, last name, phone number, date of birth, gender, image, and the role. You can just leave the role out, and that's it. So these are the things you need to get from the form. Okay, so when a user is creating, he is going to have these ones. So I'm just going to go ahead to users here, and this is the information you need to pass in coming from the form, just like this: the email, the username, the password, first name, last name, phone number, date of birth, gender, and that is it. Okay, so this is the things you get, and you're just going to write a try catch. Okay, a try catch. I'm just going to say console.log error. And now we need to have to do a couple of things with all this data we have. So the registration pattern of a user is actually almost standard and is always most the same. Okay. In most cases, when a user comes, we first check if this user already exists. So the first thing is to check, okay. Of course, you could first check if all the fields are there. Now, the validation of these fields here, I'm going to leave it for the front end. Since on the front end, we have a robust checking, more especially you're going to be using. So you would be checking, for instance, check for uh, validation, maybe we call it fields validation. So this is where you check if all these inputs or if this data sent is the actual data of the type you want. Okay. Then the next one is to check if the user already exists. Okay. And this is by just so many things, by email, username, and also by phone. And why are we saying this? That's why we made the email, username, and phone to be unique. So when you see this at unique, key is meaning that this field cannot be repeated. You cannot have two emails which are the same for a particular user in our database. And that's why we're saying the email must be unique. That's why when you're registering like on Facebook or any social media, they will tell this email is already taken, meaning they made it in their schema, they made it to be unique, meaning that you cannot have two fields, the same string for one field or two fields in the database. That one. And the username. Username, the way you select on Twitter or even YouTube, you cannot have the same username, one username for two users. You cannot have at JB Web Developer for two users, because we are going to be using it for identity. More especially when you are logging in, we ask a user to enter either email or username or even phone number. So you can just ask any of these ones and then we can use them, log them in. So these are very important to be unique. And to make sure they're unique, we must take consideration why these users are being registered. So here we have to check if the user exists, and we have to check by email, by username, and also by phone. And another one, the third one after that, is we have to go ahead and hash the password. So assuming this user does not exist, we'll go ahead and hash the password, because the password has to be hashed. You cannot save plain passwords in the database for security purposes. And the next one, if everything is okay, normally this is why you would send a verification code. So here you could just go ahead and send a verification code if that is your user flow. Now this is just dependent on the user flow and how you require. And then after this, when everything, for instance, is verified, actually this one could be sent last, not at this point. Let's go ahead and create the user. So at this point, create the user. And then this is where you could send the verification code. And then lastly is we have to, we could just remove or hide some fields in the return. So for instance, remove here, we could just say modify the returned user, just like this. Okay, so we could just like modify the return user again for protection purposes. So you're not going to do all these steps. We are going to strategically do some steps and leave others. For instance, the first one, check for field validation. This is very important, and you will see most of the people doing it at the back end uh, from many, if you're using Node.js or PHP or anything, field validation or form validation, they normally call it form validation. Normally they do it on the server. Okay, so like this is if someone has not entered the email, you send them back the email is required. Now, since for us, our team, like we heavily depend on the client side, which is, in my opinion, also not so safe. But in this case, I'm just going to do that. And the reason being, sometimes the form is too huge, and you could just create a middleware. This is what like, you could create, for instance, create a middleware to handle form validation. Okay. I'm not going to do this step, okay? As I'm saying, we're just going to make sure that the data that comes in from the client, from a React Native, we heavily use Formic and React Hook forms to make sure that all the data is validated before sent to the backend. But as I've said, you can just go ahead and create a middleware to handle this, but I will not do it. And then now the other ones, check this one, we're going to do them. We are going to handle to hash the passwords. We'll create the user. Now, since this is a user is going to be created by the admin, there is no need actually of sending the verification code. Okay. So here, I'm just going to remove this one. So we have 4 steps to do. Okay. So actually the first one always is to receive the data also. So here, receive the data. So you can just say receive the data, of which is actually step. So in the first step is here, we have destructured the data we need. Okay, we have the data we need here. So we receive the data. Step number 2 now is we'll be checking if the user already exists in the DB so that we don't create the same user a couple of times. So let's start with checking. So since we have the email, we're just going to say const existing user, and let's set with by email. So user by email, and we're just going to say is equal to await, and we just go db dot, so just to say db, which are going to import dot user. Okay, db dot user dot find unique, just like this. So just going to go ahead and just say where, and we pass in the email. Okay, so when they find any user whose email is equal to the email in any of the users, if this exists, so we can just say if existing user by email, we just have to get the response.status. I'm just going to give you a status of 409 conflict, and then we also say the JSON. We're just going to create here a JSON object where we pass in, for instance, error, and you can just say construct this very well, and we say user with, we could just say email, for instance, email already taken. So you could just say already taken. Just a simple error like this, email already taken or email already in use. Or you could just say user with this email already exists. So you could just say email already taken. Very easy and very simple. And then data we just say null. So we could just like have it just like this. Okay, so we have the status. Very important actually. In the most important things is to make sure of these statuses. Okay. Um so we have a that. Okay. And maybe one thing we could just use also, and we could just like maybe add one thing. Um, but just leave it like this. Just like leave it like this. If a ready user exists like this, we just simply do this. Okay, and we can just say also of course return. From here, we don't want to proceed in any way. So if there is exist, we just simply return. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and also do, let's do user by phone. So you can just get the user by phone. And here we just say where phone, just like this. And then lastly, we can check by, we can check by username. So you can just say by username. And we can just say here username, just like this. And we're just going to have these if statements. Okay, so we could just say since they are having different errors, we're just going to handle them differently. So I'm just going to say if existing user by phone. So here phone number. So you could just say phone number, and then we pass in this the phone. We could just say dollar, just put it inside here. Phone number here, just put phone already taken, and then the same thing email, and we could just go ahead and pass in this email here, like in the brackets here, just say email. So email, let's say g blah blah is already taken. And then finally, we're just going to do one more if statement for existing user by username. Okay, so just say username, this, which is username, is already taken. Okay, okay, we just add is already taken, is already taken, is already taken. So this is what we are returning as this. So when someone passes this level, okay, that is the first check. So if you pass this check and now we go to the second step where we hash the password. Remember very well in our starting of the video, we installed bcrypt. So this is a point where we use the bcrypt. So we can just go back to the user and then we import bcrypt. So on top here you say import bcrypt. I say just direct bcrypt. The spelling always touches me. Like I don't know why I can't have it always right. Like bcrypt from bcrypt. Okay, so we import bcrypt, and then here we just have to come here down, and then we just say that const hashed a password is equal to, I think is await bcrypt dot, I think it has a dot hash, and then like it placing like the password and the sort round is like 10. Let me just confirm. You could just come here and you say be crypt npm, and you can just look at how to hash this, like on the usage somewhere. Okay. Okay, so you can just see here. Okay, it's just like hash, and then you have the plain password plus the sort. You can even just like um you can just like also just like the passing the function, which in our case is not really necessary. Okay, so just to use this, where you have this hash, you put in the plain password and this one. So this one will give us the hashed password. So after getting our hashed password, and by the way, the sort round here, this one is how many times you want this password to be encrypted. So you can pass in 15, can pass in any number, but 10 is the best number most people use. Okay, like it's not too high and it's not too low. So when you put a very high number, is that this will take more time processing the password. So you have to get a number that is somehow intermediate, not so big and not so small. Okay, so after that, we can now go ahead and create the user. So you can say const new user is going to be equal to await db dot user dot create. Okay, and then we just go ahead and pass in the data. Okay, and in the data we just go ahead and pass in all these the data we have here. Okay, and just like this. Okay, and for this, okay, for the image, we just also want to create the image just in case the image does not exist. So you can see here, it is always best practice, I think, from the front end to give this a default. So for instance, the image, if the user does not have the image, then you default it to give it like a default string. Now you could do this from either the back end, or you can just do it from the front end. It's all about you. When you're just like validating the form, you always give it a default if it doesn't come with something. Okay, but according to here, we're just going to assume you're going to pass in the image. Okay, when you pass in the image, and it will be just like the image URL. Okay, so if you wanted to give it anything, you could just come here and you say image is equal to you give it like is equal to something. So here we have, like, for instance, password. We want to modify the password to hashed password. Okay, so this is the plain password. Here we give it this one, and even the image, as I've said, you could just say this is going to be, if image is provided, then we could just go ahead and use image. Else, you just provide the alternate you want to use here. So you could just go ahead, for instance, there is one string I always use. So you can just go ahead and upload your image somewhere. Let me just say, I always just use, like, for instance, upload thing. So you could just like go to upload thing and just get your image. So let me just go to any of these ones. I'm just going to go and just like maybe just go to any of these apps and just click on the files. Okay, there is this one. Is this like the, yeah, so I have it here, like this user. So just go ahead and upload. You can just go ahead and upload a new one, but since I have it here, I'm just going to use this one. Okay, so you have this here. So just going to copy this one and use it here. Okay, so I will just say if the image is not provided, so you're just checking if image is true. That means if it has any value coming with, then we take the image. If it doesn't have anything, we take this as the default. The way you want, you can do this from the front end. We can also do it from the back end to make sure that if there's nothing provided from the front end, we have something on the back end. Okay, so for others, like the email, leave it for number and everything, just leave the way it is. And then we just go ahead and create the user. So this user is created. Now we could just do something like, now afterwards, we could just say that raise dot status, okay, 201 for being for created dot JSON. And then here in the JSON, we could pass in something like data to be new user, like just like this, new user, and then like error to be null. There is no any errors, just like this. So you could just like return something like this. We're just going to talk about the return the user. So let's just try to go ahead and create a user, and we see we have to work on the routing first. So we created a controller for create user. We have to use this controller in our routes. So just go in the route. We don't have this route, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a new route here for the users. Okay, so you can just create this one as user.ts. This one will hold all the routes for the users. The first thing is to say import express. Okay, import express, just like that. Express from express. So from here, just going to say const user router is equal to express dot router, just like this. And then we just go ahead and export default a user router, just like this. And then in between here, we can use this user router to create routes. So the first one is the post. So this one is going to be stroke users. So you just go to stroke users. Then here you'll be hitting the endpoint to create a new user. And then goes slash. And then here we can just say create a user. Okay. Now, in most cases, you will see, if you're just going to see like other tutorials, you will see putting something here. If you had, when you had me saying about creating within the controller here, in the user here, creating the middleware. So if you created the middleware somewhere that validates the data, this is why you actually put the middleware. So when you just come here in the router, in between here, if you had a middleware, this is where it would go. Just a middle is just like a function that intercepts data. So you would just have something like this. You will have a function in between here which says validate user data. And this takes in like a request and response. So it has ability to intercept data and then like do the validations and do the errors. Now, in our case, as I've said, it is not really necessary because we're going to be actually doing client validation. So in this case, we just have the users and then create user function, which comes from these controllers. So after we have created this, we have to use it in the index. So just go to index and let's duplicate this. We say app.use v1 and we're just going to say user router, just like this. Okay. So we have now two routes. Now we're just going to test this. Okay. And to know the fields we need to pass in, I'm just going to simply copy these ones, except the image. Okay. And since now we talked about this gender and DOB, you have to be very careful of these two. Okay. So let's just go and see the gender, for instance. So in the schema, gender must be of type male or female. So you must pass in any of these two words. Then for the date of birth, you can see they say it is a date. Okay. Now you depending on how you want to store this, okay, depending on how you want to store this, you could also store it as a string. The way you normally see, I think is Google, how they select their date, okay, how they create the date of birth. It is dependent on you whether you want someone to select the month, the year, and then select the date. You can either just choose to make it daytime, or you can just make it a string. Whichever it becomes easy for you, you can use that. The good thing, it is optional. So when you want to make something optional in Prisma, if you see this one like first name is required, these are all required. There's something which has a question mark means it is not required. And also this one has a question mark means it is not required. So if we don't provide it in our form, then it is very okay. So I will just go back to the here. I will copy the things I want. Control C. Let's go to Postman. Postman. Where is Postman? Here. So I'm just going to change, and here we have been using testing. So I want to create an actual folder now. I'm just going to go ahead and add a folder. I'm just going to add this as users. And inside this, I will add the first request, which says get create a user. So I'll just create something like this, create a user, and make it a post. And I'm going to go to the body, go to raw, and then we can pass in this. Let me just extend it here. Now let's go at the URL. The URL, we used it here in the test. I'm just going to go here, copy this, Control C. Let me take it here and paste it here. So this one is going to be v1 stroke users, and it's going to be a post. And then here we can pass in a couple of things. And before that, you can also just go ahead and save this. Okay, we save it so that we can always use it. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass in this information. So for instance, I want to pass in this, create a user. I'm just going to say, for instance, JB, this is hub.com. How is supposed to be how do we pass in the data? Do I still remember really? Yeah, it's supposed to be like that. Okay, let me just go back here. Okay, so make sure this is in this uh it is an object. So we pass in a JSON object. So And then the username, I'm just going to say username is going to be JB Web Developer. And then the password, I'm just going to make it like test. Okay, password is going to be test. And then first name is going to be maybe uh, okay. Then the last name is going to be John Baptist. The phone number is going to be maybe plus 256, just like this. Okay, so let's just enter this. So since this one is not required, I'm just going to leave it out. Okay, to show that some fields can be optional. And then the gender, gender is required. So here you can just say gender is male. And finally is the image. I'm not going to provide any image. Let me just leave it just like this. So this is the data we have. I'm just going to push this data and see what happens. So send. Okay, so you can see this was created and we have an object back which has the data here plus also null. Here there is no any errors and the status is of 201. And you can see they created here the ID, the email, the username, and the password. Then the first name, last name, then the phone number. So you can see the DOB is now gender, and now you can see the image. Since we didn't give anything, the image they put this one. The role is given to a tenant, and then they gave these ones. So great. So the problem we have is that you don't want when you are returning this back because the person on the front end might want to use this data after it has been created, maybe route or do anything they want with this data. But then we don't want them to have access to the password. So you have to at least go ahead and hide this password from the return. That's what I was saying, modifying the return statement. You don't want this here to be returned the password to be returned in the user. So we could just go ahead and just say, for instance, so you say const, and then we can destructure this. So we can just say password, and then dash dash with the structure like others, and then just say is equal to new user, just like this. So we just know in the new user, when we return this, um, there is a password in it and so many others. So here when I do this password and then I destructure or I spread others, I'll be referring to all the remaining fields. So instead of just like using this password, I'm just going to come here, data to be others. So now let's go ahead and try to create a new user now. So before this, let's just try to actually test for the errors. So if I try to create the same user, let's try to create the same exact user, we'll see what happens. And let's just also make sure we have the returns. Oh, okay, so there is this some error we have here. We have hashed password, has any because it does not have any type annotation. to this, and then this one has now a problem, also has any because does not have any type annotations and reference. Okay, we're just going to create the types for this in a second. Okay, this one we could just say it is a string, just like this, and the password blocked variable used before its declaration. So because we have another password down, they are not seeing the one we have up here. So let's just go here, and I'm just going to rename this, and we can rename this as, we can just rename this as the, maybe saved password, saved password. Just like this. We can just give it any other name, and this will solve the problem. So they will be now using this password within this one here. Okay, great. So here we have this. I just want to first test our errors. We said if the email already exists, then it should just give us this first error, then the second one, and the third one. So let's just go back to the postman, and I'm just going to create a request with the same data. Okay, so you can see here, they are saying here, error, email, this already is already taken. So you can just see here, very nice error, and there is no any data. So I'm just going to go and change that. I'm just going to say uh, mukjb@gmail.com. I'm just going to send again without sending other data. So you can see error phone number. This one is already taken. So you can just go ahead and just add another phone number. Okay. And then if I send one more time, you can see username is already taken. So at least we have all these being handled very well, the errors. Now let's just go ahead and create. So I can also change this to, okay, just leave the names. So the names are the same. Okay, so now you can see we have the data, but then we don't have the password. Okay, so the password has been removed from the return statement, and that is how you can destructure or remove some things you don't want from being seen. If there is any sensitive data you want to see from this one, you can actually remove it from the return, and that's how you can remove it. Great. So right now we have this. Good. So we have this done very nicely. Okay, so the create user is working perfectly. So we can just say go ahead and get the simple one of get user. So you can just say export async function get users. So you could just have the one of getting users. We are going to look at, for instance, get users or get shop attendants. We're just going to look at that. But right now, just first create, for instance, this get users. A very simple one. Try catch. And we can just say, for instance, here, const users is equal to await db dot user dot find many, just like so. And just going to pass in order by, and then here we can just say created at, and then we pass in descending, just like this. And then we can just go ahead and say raise, dot status, raise dot status. So here in this, it has taken these two, the response and the request. So you can just say here raise dot status, and then here you have status of 200, and then here dot JSON, just like this. And you can pass in the same thing. You can pass in data, you can pass in data as the users, and then you can also just say error to just null. Okay, so you have this, and then for this, by the way, even including here, so you just want here to return, just go ahead and you return a response. So you can say return, I guess you just like return this. So you just want to return a response to the status of 500 internal server error, with error saying something went wrong. So say something went wrong, something like this, and then the data of null. So similarly, the here we just have to return this. Okay, you can also console.log error for purposes of debugging. Okay, great. So now if I just go back, I can just go back to this, and let's go ahead and create the endpoint for get users. Just go back to user here in the routes, and let's create another route. So this one is .get, and then it's going to get users, just like this. So if I just go to this endpoint, okay, if I just go to this endpoint now, we saved this endpoint just like this. I just want to go inside the still the user and add another request. We can duplicate this one, and I'm just going to create this one, and I'm just going to call it, first of all, rename this to get users, and then I'm just going to say this is a gate, the same thing, and save it, and let's run it. Okay, so you can see you get back a list of users on the data. So, okay, so we have this here, the list of users back. So you could also just like say, when someone is getting a list of users, you don't want to get maybe this password. Okay, you don't want to show this password when you get back the users. Now you have to ask yourself, when am I going to use these users? Okay, because normally what you will be requiring is, for instance, getting all the shopper tenants. Maybe when you go to a certain shop, you can actually look at the tenants and so on and so forth. But just going to look at that in a second. For this one, when you go to the users, okay, so after getting them here, you could just like instead just say const, okay, resulted, could just say maybe could just say filtered users is equal to users. So after getting these users, I could just like map through them. So just get access to a user, and then you can just go ahead and return an object. So you can just go ahead and return an object that you want. You may just say, I don't want to return all the data back. I might just want to return a few things. Okay. You can just go ahead and return a few things. I don't know if we could just like use the same technique we used there here, and we say, for instance, const, and we destructure a password. Can I just like destructure password, then others from user, and now I can just simply return others, just like this. And then here I'm just going to filter the users, just like this. This helps to secure information at all costs. And then I'm just going to go ahead and let's go ahead and go back, and you can see that the password is gone. Okay, so we have removed the password. So if you want to remove more fields, you can simply just pass them within here. You can just say, I don't want to pass in role. So if you just do this, you have taken role off. If I just go back here, you see here right now, we can see the role attendance. If you just like now do this, you see that the role is gone. Okay, so just leave it there. It will be used a lot. Okay, so right now we are good. We have also fetch the users. Okay, you can also go ahead and get a single user. So just go here, get user by ID. Okay, and we have to first get the ID. So you can say const ID is equal to request dot params. So this one comes from the params, just like this. After getting it, then we can just say user is await db dot user dot find unique. Excuse me. So you have here, just going to say where, and here we just pass in the ID. So where ID, just like this, and then we're just going to go ahead and return the user. Now this one also has the same concept. It has you could just say const, and then you say password, then others, and then is equal to the user. Okay, it does not exist on the type, does not exist on the type. Let's just see here, this password does not exist on the type string, email, username, string. Seeing here password, maybe I wrote the wrong spelling. I don't know what this means. Could even just call this result, and then here we pass in result. Why are they saying they cannot see password when I'm saying does not exist on the type? And clearly I'm seeing it here. Password, first name, string, last name, and the password is here. Okay. Clearly I don't understand why. Because the password, as you can see, it already exists here. on this. So why does it say that it does not seem to see it? Okay, let me just wait a second. Let me first try to get this user by ID, and I'll just like sort that in a second. So here I'm just going to go ahead and pass in users slash ID, just like this. And here just say get user by ID. Okay, they just try to get that here. I'll copy the ID of one user, just like this. Stroke like this. Okay, so we have this, and the password is actually not included. However, we have this uh, we have this error here. The password does not exist on the type. Is as if this one has a different type. So just like fix that one. So at this point, let me see. Okay, so this episode is already 1 hour. I intend to keep these episodes to a time frame of 1 hour. So I'm just going to suggest that we keep here and we resume in the next episode. So thank you so much. I will see you in the next episode.